Welcome back to the C2 Life. Lindsay, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be here with you to continue our series on our stories.
Yeah, we in the first part of this series we talked about our dating life,
hmm
and that was a lot of fun. And then last time we were together, we talked about the first year of marriage, really get engagement, first year of marriage. Walked through a lot there, and today our goal is to get to from none to one,
Right.
right?
Children.
Yeah, none to one children. So going from the first few years of our marriage to having our first child, Jackson.
Yeah.
So
So we left off that last episode celebrating our first anniversary, our first wedding anniversary. So we kind of want to look at those first few years after that and then leading up to deciding to actually grow our family and have,
just
have kids.
to give everybody an idea of like historical timeline. So what years are we're talking about? We got married in 2003, so we kind of got you through 2003 up to 2004.
hmm
When we last left, you were laughing at a very genuine statement that I made at first, and then because you thought I was kind of telling a joke when I
Right.
said, "Hey, I'm just thankful to the Lord that we made it through our first year. That our first year of marriage was financially stable." You laughed because you thought it was a joke,
Right.
and I was very serious about that. We were able to pay our bills. We didn't go into any debt, like that kind of thing. Made us, I felt like, was a financially stable first year. So there we are, basically thousandaires,
Yeah.
living the dream.
Yeah.
I was serving as a youth pastor, and you were finishing up your elementary education degree at Auburn University,
Yeah. And really the whole premise
current
behind
regular season SEC champs.
Yes, thank you. The whole premise behind why we want to do this series is to kind of one, have a little fun with reminiscing and thinking back over what God has done in our life. But two, we wanted to look at the different seasons of our life and try to pull out the things that the Lord taught us in those seasons that might be beneficial for other people who are looking at that same season of life, or maybe they're parenting kids through that season of life right now. And as we begin to think about, over the next 10 years, we'll, Lord willing, be parenting some of our kids through some of those seasons of life.
Yeah, so I think people are going to be surprised to know that we were married for 5 years before we had children,
hmm
and that was intentional. That was something that we planned. Of course, you can't always plan when children come, but we had intended it to be that way.
We would tell people because you start getting that question as
Yeah,
soon as the wedding is
sure.
over. Well, when are you guys going to have kids? And so we really would say we're on a 5-year plan.
5 year plan, yeah. And
We
people
really
would say
wanted
you can't really plan it out that way.
right, and you can't
And you can't, but
always,
in our
but
case, we actually did.
worked out great.
Our first child was born, what, 1 month after our fifth anniversary.
He was.
So we spent 5 years just as a married couple. I've wondered, you and I have not talked about this, so this is the first time right here on video, on audio. If you
Mhm.
could do it over again, would you do it that way?
I would
Okay.
100%.
Why?
Because we were young enough when we got married that I felt like we had some years to be able to give
You
to
were
one
19,
another.
I was 23 when we
Right.
got married.
Right. And so I felt like it was really important. We learned a lot of important skills and even ways to interact with each other and what are we looking at financially? What does it take to run a home? All of those things. I mean, I know you had really been living on your own for a few years already, but I had not. I had always lived in a college dorm room or with an apartment with college roommates, and I had never really been responsible for myself, or co-responsible with one other person out from underneath the dependence of my parents. And so it was important for me to learn those things. It was important for me to have the responsibility of working a job, and those things really did teach me a lot. And having time with just you, where we could build the foundation of our relationship and we could grow together as man and wife, that was really beneficial when it came time to be parents. Now, not to say that we couldn't have handled those things or the Lord wouldn't have used different ways to teach us those things. It's
Right.
just, it seemed like such a wonderful and beautiful time to be able to really build something special before children were added into the mix of the
I think
family.
for me, the aspect of us getting to spend time together, I married you because I love you and I like to be around you. And so the idea that we got to spend 5 years together before children really came into the picture, which is another reason why we would encourage people to get married young. Get married young, but make sure that you are a young man marrying a young woman.
Right. Not a
not a
young
girl marrying
boy.
a boy,
Right.
or even a young woman marrying a boy.
Right.
You're looking for a young man to marry. But that's back to the dating podcast. So, as the Lord would allow you and lead you into a good relationship, get married early. That way you get to spend your life together.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, here we are 21 years into marriage, 25 years into our relationship. And really, all I want to do is spend time with you.
Hmm.
And so I would pray that the Lord would bless other relationships in that way as well. Also, in those years, we got to meet people and observe families together.
Yes.
And we got to observe two really key families. I mean, they absolutely changed the trajectory of our lives. So many people have invested in us, but as far as families go and what family life looks like,
Yes.
meeting and getting to spend time with the McClendons,
Hmm.
and then meeting and getting to spend time with Bill and Elizabeth Mitchell.
Hmm.
And we mentioned the McClendons last time, but we got to spend some time with them. And then the Mitchells we got to know through Tom McClendon served as my pastor, so that's how we got to know Tom and Betty. But then Bill and Elizabeth, I went through a doctoral program, and just before the season of kids kicked in, we got to know their family and we got to observe their family. And so
Yeah.
just like being able to spend time around those families and say, those are the kind of families that we want to have.
That's right. I think God really blessed us in that season to be able to meet them and for them to be used. And I know they don't. They don't know what kind of an impact they had. They weren't trying to tell us anything about how they were leading a family. They didn't take us to the side and, tell us all these things unasked.
We just watched.
We watched and observed, and we weren't with them all the time, especially the Mitchells. We got to see them a couple weeks at a time, a
Yeah.
couple times a year, but their family was so uniquely different and brought such glory to the Lord in the way that they lived their
Yeah.
lives that it really impacted us.
And I would also say that we've told them, by the way, we've told them that they've made an impact in our lives.
We named our daughter after
Right.
Elizabeth. So
But they still don't know.
No.
That we can tell them, and we try to as many times as we have opportunity, but they still really just don't know what an impact they made on us. And so I hope that people who are listening and you live your life in a way that honors the Lord, I hope your impact is much bigger than you know.
Yeah.
And I hope the McClendons and Mitchells hear this and once again are reminded that they made a massive impact in our lives. Now, financial stability. All right, it's the end of our first year. We have this conversation about financial stability. We have been financially stable throughout our marriage from the standpoint that the Lord has always provided for us.
Mm-hmm.
He has blessed us above and beyond all that we could ask or imagine. But that financial stability, the way it looked, changed pretty quickly after that first year.
It did. So I was headed into my final semester, my final year at Auburn. And the first semester of that year would be my student teaching, my internship. And so I had already had that lined up. I was going to be doing that in Columbus, Georgia at a DoD school. And I mean, the
Department of Defense.
Correct. And the plan was that would open up doors for me to be able to get the job of my dreams. And, they pay very well. It's a really good environment. And so that was all lined up. Really excited about that. And then
At the time, a teacher, a first-year teacher would make like $30,000. A first-year Department of Defense teacher made like $60,000.
yeah, it was a
Significantly better pay.
Yes. And of course, a safe environment, all those things. So really excited about that, had been approved for that. And then I would still have one more semester because of the way that the program worked at Auburn. You could choose if you wanted to do your internship in the fall or the spring. And so I chose the fall because I really wanted to see what it looked like to establish a classroom setting. And I just felt like that would be, the better choice of which semester to do. So then I would still have a few classes to take afterwards.
And then I was, our financial stability discussion, I was serving as a full-time youth pastor. I'd gotten a huge raise at the end of my first year, and we were living in a house that was owned by the church. It was such a great
with
environment.
a couch.
Well, oh yes, and we had a couch. Boy, did we have a couch. We had a couch. And it was kind of the small town. We talked about it a little bit last time where on any given day, somebody would offer the youth pastor a free meal. It was just a great little town to live in. And so from a financial standpoint, we were in a really stable place. And then I just knew I knew the Lord was calling me to be a senior pastor,
Mhm.
but I was very reluctant because I was young. I was 23 years old, and I think by this time I was probably 24. And so I was just reluctant to do that. And I just felt like God was calling me to be a senior pastor, which I knew that probably meant bivocational, very part time, a small church that couldn't pay me very much, no church owned house or anything like that. So that all kind of came together where I knew, and it was one of those things where, and I won't go into the detail. That's probably for another podcast. But I knew God was calling me. He was calling me to Mount Carmel Baptist Church. I had served there previously as an interim pastor. I was saved and baptized there. I knew the Lord was calling us there, but I also knew what that meant. And as all of that kind of came into it became clear the Lord was moving that direction. It all happened real quickly, and it happened, if I remember, it was like May, June. It was
Right.
the end of the school year,
Mhm.
into the college school year for
Mhm.
you. And so that meant everything had for you, for your schoolwork, had to turn on a dime, and it all had to fall into place. So walk us through that.
Yeah, so the first thing I did was I called the education department at Auburn, and
School was already
school
out.
was out, finals were over. I really wasn't expecting to get anybody, but I did, and it was just one of those things, the Lord's timing and providence in it. I actually got straight to the dean because nobody else was there.
The dean answered the phone.
The dean answered
The
the
dean of the
phone.
school of the College of Education at Auburn University picked up the phone when you called.
He did. And so I was able to explain the situation that my husband's in ministry and he had just received a new ministry assignment and that we would need to be moving and I would no longer be able to do my student teaching at Columbus. And I wanted to see if I could possibly find another location for my student teaching. And so I told him where we were going to be, and he said that the furthest north that they could send me would be to Sylacauga, and so that was about an hour and a half from where we would be living. And so I was willing. I said, I'm willing to do that if you can work that out. And he himself made all the arrangements and worked everything out in order to put me in that place. And I got connected with an excellent teacher. Had a fantastic experience, but it all had to happen just that way
Then and
because
there,
it never
in one phone call.
in one phone call.
It just
Yeah,
all this fell into place. And
yeah,
not only that, but you had to get a special exemption
I
to
did.
take your last class at a different
I
school.
did.
So you had to take you ended up taking your last class at
I had to
Jacksonville
take
State.
PE,
And
elementary PE.
and according to the accreditation standards, you can't do that for your last semester.
Right.
But they gave you an
Yeah,
exemption and
granted
you
me
were able
special
to,
permission to
yeah.
do that, so I could still graduate with my class at Auburn after that. So that was really amazing.
So, but what that meant for us financially, with you being a student, and so you didn't have any income, and then I was a bivocational pastor. So I was a bivocational pastor. I had a friend who ran a landscaping business, and he said, "Hey, you can come to work for me." He was just getting the landscaping business started, and so I was the second employee that he hired. He hired me and said, "I know you're a pastor first, and so you work when you can, when you can't, whatever." He was very flexible, and that was not easy for him. So shout out to Jonathan Copeland, Copelandscapes. If you're living in the Etowah County area, I
Hmm.
mean, they are your go-to source for all of
Pristine
your.
work.
I mean, by the way, yes, absolutely, nobody will do better work than him. I guarantee you that.
But I have to
Jonathan
say,
is meticulous. He is one of the most meticulous, hardworking people I have ever been around, and I've had the privilege to be around a lot of them. So if you want it done well, he's your guy.
we use him as an example all the time about how if you are a business owner or if you have any sort of influence in your business or your company, how you can leverage that for kingdom work and for kingdom impact. That he really did that well, and he really put you in a lot of positions to be able to have gospel
He
conversations
did.
with people, and he
If we
really
had a
saw the big picture of, hey, he is doing what he's doing, yes, as a job to make money for his family and to be successful, but at the end of actually advancing the kingdom. That's really
If
a
we
big
had a
deal.
lost employee, there was no doubt that I was going to be scheduled with that lost employee. and for the sole purpose of sharing the gospel with that person. And yeah, he did, absolutely. He leveraged what God had gifted him with in order to advance the kingdom, and still does.
Hmm.
So I'd also like to thank Copeland Scapes for sponsoring the Christ Centered Life.
Thank you.
They don't really sponsor, although Jonathan would. If we said, "Hey, we need a sponsor," I'm sure Jonathan would jump on board. He was very supportive of us when we
Yeah.
moved to. This is not a commercial for Jonathan, but I will tell you when we moved to Miami. I don't know if you remember this or not, but he called and said, "Hey, I heard about what you're doing and all that." And I said, "Man, thank you. Pray for us." And they supported us financially. But he also said, "I have a fully furnished basement.
Yeah.
So I want you to know, if you move to Miami and this doesn't work out, you and your family have a place to live."
He sure did.
Man, that just meant the world to me. So anyway, so he brought me on board, and I worked for him, but then also pastored the church, and then I did some work with the Etowah Baptist Association, working with the summer missions program I'd worked with before. So we just kind of pieced it all together and made it all work. And man, those were great years from a
Yeah.
ministry perspective. The Lord just really blessed us,
Yeah.
and
We got to do some really unique ministry things together, and in a context where, because you were born and raised in that community, in that church, they loved you like a son or grandson. And so you already had the relational capital to be able to do some pretty unique things ministry wise. And it was just a really incredible thing. And I think that the Lord used that particular ministry opportunity to open our eyes to some other opportunities
yeah,
that would come later down the road.
it was at Mount Carmel that I learned the importance of reaching cities.
Hmm.
And I mean, Gadsden's not this great big city. It's a city of 50,000 people. But you got to remember who I was. I mean, I was a country boy, and the city to me was not the place I wanted to be. And so to really have my eyes opened to the thought that, well, we've got to reach the city. This is where the people are. I know that sounds so elementary, but I just didn't think that way.
Mm.
And so to have my eyes opened of, if we're actually serious about reaching people for the gospel, we have to go where the people are. And so Mount Carmel did that for me, and they were such a gracious church.
Mhm.
You just I can't say enough about a first church to pastor, how supportive they were, how encouraging they were, how loving they were. And we just saw God do a lot of things there. And so that was now it was tough because of the season of life. Oh, by the way, I was also a full-time seminary student. So
Mhm.
I was working my way through seminary. So I would go one day a week, and then sometimes more than one day a week. I would go to seminary classes. Then I worked landscaping as I could. I was pastoring a church, and then sometimes doing some work for the Etowah Baptist Association.
Mhm.
You were going through your last year as a student teacher, and then as a student graduating.
Mhm.
Then
I did a little
eventually,
tutoring work. You remember that?
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. So this
Won't
is
name
where,
the company, but
yeah, Lindsay
uh,
You worked for a company, and you remember what I constantly told you about this?
yes, I do. But at the time, it was really about getting the experience to put on a resume. But you were constantly saying, "Babe, you could make 3 times that amount of
Yes,
money for
they
the time and effort that you're putting into this job."
they are
Because
totally ripping you off. Yeah.
they were not paying fair wages to their employees, but it did give me good experience, and it did give me an extra line on my resume to be able to move into the teaching job I wanted. So
And so there we are in those first years of marriage. We're doing ministry together. Don't have any kids yet. We bought our first home.
hmm
That was something. That was quite a process.
yeah,
We have some great real estate stories, but anyway, so we bought that first home, which was a great
it
home.
was.
It was a not a foreclosure. No, it was a
It was a
foreclosure.
foreclosure.
It was a foreclosure, and so whoever had had the foreclosure happen, as a lot of people do, they took all of the appliances out. So there
Yeah.
was no water heater, there was no air conditioner, there was no refrigerator or
A lot of
anything.
cosmetic damage
A
that
lot
we
of
had
cosmetic,
to
but a good
repair,
house.
yeah.
The house itself was solid, and so we bought the house, and we kind of remodeled it. I would say we painted it, replaced the flooring, and replaced all the appliances and that kind of thing. So it's kind of like a soft remodel,
Mhm.
and we really loved that house. What are the memories you have from that house?
Well,
there are some great memories from that house.
um, I will say, the time your dad made me cry
Yeah,
because, I was working really hard to try to paint the house and, um, I'm not a painter,
yeah,
and I didn't do so great with that, and then it was just everybody was tired, we
sure.
were all exhausted, and he just said he made one comment about the paint job that I had done, and I just lost it, but
And by the way, I think we should say, and it's no surprise to anybody listening to this podcast, my dad is the kindest,
he is
softest
so
hearted
sweet,
person
yes. He
you
was
could
just
ever
trying
meet.
to really tease me just to show
Yeah,
me he loves me, and it just hurt a little bit.
yeah.
But then
Then
I have to say, probably my second favorite memory of the remodel process of that house are hearing him say all the "whoops, dag
oops,
nabbit,
uh-oh.
that ain't good,"
So
all trying
so
to repair things in the house.
specifically, and I think this was after the painting
It
incident.
was.
He was upstairs working on the shower, and all of a sudden you hear him with I think it was a "that's not good,"
Yeah.
and my dad has a level of well snot, and
Yes.
that's one of the things he says, and then dag nabbit and all that, and I can tell you that's not good. That that's serious. When my dad says, "Well, that's not good," that
You better run.
something is bad wrong. And so we got a from upstairs. Well, that's not good. And then all of a sudden, water started running down the wall,
Yes, it
the
was
the
like
freshly
pooling
painted
up in the
wall,
ceiling.
and so
Yeah.
there was a small shower issue, and so we had to turn the water off and fix that. But
Yeah.
do you remember when I called you and said, "Hey," when this was after the remodeling, so we
Mhm.
remodeled the house,
This
moved
is
into
about
the
a year
house.
into living there.
About a year later, I called you and said, "Hey, when you come home, make whatever you do, don't come through the back door."
Yes. And, so, of course, curiosity gets me, and I walk in, and I look down, and there's just a hole.
And
There's just a hole in our
I think
kitchen floor
I
where
think I had told you there's a hole,
it was big, though.
but
You didn't prepare me
I
for
didn't
the
prepare you
size.
for the size of the hole. That hole was about the size of a small automobile.
It was huge. That we
So
coulda made a hot tub in
sure.
our breakfast nook.
And what happened, this is actually the first time I learned this lesson. When you see something that is rotten,
Mhm.
the part you see that is rotten is
Mhm.
a small representation of a much larger issue. And so for weeks, I'd been kind of walking on that spot and I'd noticed it's a little soft. I think there's some rotten wood under there where the doorway is. And so I just decided it was my off day and I had a day off and I decided, you know what, today's the day. I'm gonna replace, and I really thought I would be replacing just maybe like a 1 foot section of rotten board. I had the wood to do it. So I thought I'll pull this back, I'll replace that rotten piece, and we'll move on with our lives. Well, the more that I pulled back, the more rot that I discovered, and like the floor joists were rotten and all this stuff. So I thought I'll pull this back, replace it, get the linoleum laid back down, and you know what? I'll have all this done in a couple of hours. And several hours later, there's a giant hole. I had to call in my dad for reinforcements, my brother, who was a contractor. So like I had to start calling in reinforcements. I had to let you know we slept for several nights with a giant hole there that we had covered over with something. I don't know, but anyway, we eventually did get that replaced.
So
And
speaking of home repairs and the joys of being homeowners, do you remember the night before we had our open house for our Mount Carmel church friends to come over
I
and
I remember the open
visit?
house, but I don't remember the night before.
So we stayed up until about 2 a.m. with
Mm.
flashlights out in the front yard, laying down pavers
Yep,
to make a way to
I
be
do
able to
remember
walk
that.
from the driveway to the front door.
It was my first major project. Really, was rebuilding the stairs. I didn't like the stairs on the side. We moved them to the front, rebuilt those stairs. We often drive by that house, and one of my main objectives for driving by that house is to see if the stairs are still there. And as far as I know, they're still
They're
standing.
holding strong, baby.
And
You did
so
good.
we did that. I do remember that, and it was cold too. It was in December, so it was really cold. We were out there, and you stuck with me.
Yeah.
And we got those
But
pavers laid
I
down.
think these are the kind of things that really did build the team building.
Yeah,
It's like a team building
right.
game between me and
And
you
and
that
I'll
helped
say,
us.
in all of that, um, God just gave us such. We never argued. We never fought. There was no like 2 a.m. and you're throwing a paver at my head or
Right.
anything like that. There was never. Hey, and I would say this to couples. Listen, grace. I tore a gigantic hole in our floor, but I did that because I'm trying to make our house better.
Right.
I'm not doing that because I tried to tear a hole in the floor.
Right.
And your response was just, well, okay, well, you know what? There's a hole in the floor and I know you'll fix it.
Mhm.
And it may take a month to fix it, but I'll do my best. And I'm working, 3 jobs and going to seminary and trying my best to make all this work. And so it's going to take me longer.
And so much of that response really comes with the way that you communicate to me. So, you call me and you say, "Hey, babe, I just want you to know you led with humor, and hey, you might not want to come in the back door." And so it automatically lightens up that mood when we're talking, rather than you coming in with the, "Hey, I need you to know this, but before I tell you," and then laying out your case to try
Yeah.
to be defensive about it. So I'll say there's two sides of that coin. The grace response comes easily when you are graciously communicating with me as well. And when I know you have my best interest in mind with everything that you do, I know that everything that you're doing is for a reason and a purpose that would be to benefit me or to benefit, our marriage. And so anyway,
I would say to couples it doesn't matter, first 5 years or 50 years in, benefit of the doubt.
mhm,
Just would you just assume that your spouse actually cares about you and is trying to do the best that they can do until you're proven otherwise. Now, it may not be true. You may find out that your spouse is the most selfish person on earth who's out to undermine your life and your family's life. But in most cases, that's not true.
that's right.
In most cases, just extend the benefit of the doubt that, we're trying to figure this out. We're doing the best that we can. And anyway, so we had a lot of fun in that house, remodeling that house. And I will never forget signing a loan for $99,000. The house was $90,000. We were borrowing an additional $9,000 to do the repairs that needed to be done. And I remember sitting in that law office and just like having a moment. I'm about to put my name on a piece of paper that says I will pay somebody $99,000.
hmm
Over the course of 30 years, sure, but still $99,000.
Right.
Like that thought just overwhelmed me. And so, of course, now a house loan for $99,000 seems like nothing, but at the time, boy, it was huge. And our house payment, I think it was $560 a month. And that was our first house payment.
Yeah.
So
And you've always been meticulous to read every contract you've ever had to
yeah, I
sign.
caught a
I mean,
mistake in that
you did.
contract.
You caught a
I
typo.
caught a typo, and they were like, "No one's ever actually read that part." I
Derek
was like,
Allen did.
"Well, I'm about to sign that I'm going to pay you $99,000. I want to read this
So
thing."
these are things that I learned about you in those
Yeah.
5 years. I learned you're not the kind of person that's going to be hasty with a decision like that. You're not the kind of person who's going to let the fine print slip in and, put us at risk or put us at danger. And so those things made me feel protected. Those things made me feel like I was going to be well cared for as a wife, and that our family, our future family, was going to be well taken care of, because you were looking out for us. You were making sure that things that needed to be done were getting done. You were sacrificing. You were working really, really hard on multiple jobs. You were leading the church well, and all of those things were continuing to build my perspective of you as my husband.
I'll say too something that I've learned about marriage is that, and I wouldn't have put this into words. I wouldn't have known this when we first got married. I mean, my thought was, God has called me to take care of someone, and I need to take care of someone no matter what. That was instilled in me. My grandfather, my father, the men that I saw around me. I grew up around men who were men,
hmm
and they weren't perfect men, but they were men who at the end of they were going to take care of people.
hmm
My grandfather very much was that way. My father was that way. Whatever they had to do to make sure that the people that they were in charge of were taken care of, they were going to do it. None of them were wealthy. None of them just had all kinds of money, but they made sure everything was taken care of. And at the end of the day, that was what I thought. What I've learned since then, and especially seeing the issues in some marriages, is that women are looking for security. God has designed women to find security, but the security doesn't come from a bank account. The security doesn't come from, oh well, we've got $100,000 in savings, and so if anything goes wrong, we've got that. I'll be honest with you. if you have $100,000 in savings, that's not real security. That can be gone so fast.
Right.
I mean, it takes a lot of money to live. And so $100,000 in savings can be gone so fast. But where security comes from is that a woman sees in her husband that he will do whatever it takes. That if mistakes are made, then he's going to do whatever he can to make up for those mistakes. That he just has a care and concern for the people that he's in charge of, and he's going to take care of it no matter what. And then I would say on the reverse side of that, there's a grace that is extended. And I think so many times about the story that E.V. Hill told. E.V. Hill was a pastor from previous generation, powerful preacher. And he tells the story about the time that he got this wild idea that he was going to become a businessman. In addition to be a well-known preacher, he was going to become a businessman, and he bought a gas station. And he took all their life savings, and he bought a gas station. And his wife actually told him it was a bad idea. So he goes and he buys this gas station, puts in their entire life savings into it, and it does not go well. And the day comes where he's got to close down the gas station. They're going to lose everything they've invested in this gas station. And he has to tell his wife, hey, it's not going to work. And he said, I called her and told her, and then on the way home, I expected to walk in and have her look at me and say, you're a failure. I told you we shouldn't have invested that money. And now we've lost that money, and now what are we going to do? And that was not her response. Her response was she affirmed him. She encouraged him. I know you're a godly man. I know you love our family, and I know you do whatever it takes to take care of our family. Mm-hmm. And he said, in that moment, I could have either been crushed as a man or I could have been affirmed as a man. And she had every right to say, I told you so, and what were you doing, and all that kind of stuff, but she didn't choose that path. And I think that was very much, I think you spoke those words, but I also think I just had a general feeling that you believed in me, you had confidence in me, that you trusted me. Doesn't mean you wouldn't speak into decisions that we made and share your thoughts on all those things, but that at the end of the day, you trusted that I would take care of us. And that, well, there's so much there.
Well, and that's because time after time, in very big ways and then in very small ways, you proved that you would. You had opportunities to show that you were going to do whatever it took, do the things that you didn't want to do the things that nobody else wanted to do in order to provide for our family and take care of me. And so even in little things, you really did demonstrate that, and I saw that in you. And so it built that confidence over those years. The other thing that you did that I think really freed me from some of the fear and burden that I think I had going into marriage was you ate everything I cooked for you and you loved it. And if you didn't, you were really good at faking it that you loved it.
I've never been a picky eater, and the thought that somebody else would actually make food for me. Now, look, my mom and dad, my mom cooked for us, but my dad also cooked a lot for us because my mom went back to school when I think I was 10 or 11 or 12 when she went back to school. And our lives were extremely busy, and so my dad had to take over a lot of the cooking. He experimented, and we were his subjects, and he became a very good cook, and he's still a very good cook, and so is my mom. But once I got out on my own, I just kind of anybody who would cook for me, I was all for it. And so I got married, and you cooked, and I did. There were a couple of things, mainly grilled cheese. I had to say, baby, I will eat baked cheese, but this is baked cheese.
Right.
Grilled cheese, it's my favorite thing. And so, if you would just maybe ask my dad how he makes grilled cheese, then
and that's what I did. And
that's what you did, and you're great at grilled cheese. But even still, the baked cheese, if somebody else is going to cook it for me, then I'll eat it. I'm not a picky eater at all.
But there was, that was one very simple way that I think you made me feel like I was contributing, and you made me feel very loved and special just by not complaining. The lack of complaining, and that. I think everybody can make that choice. We can all make the choice to just not complain. And it may not be about food. There are a lot of opportunities in an early marriage to complain.
Mm.
Things that are different. And you just mentioned it. Our family, we baked the cheese. In your family, you grilled the cheese. Everybody does laundry different. Everybody has a different way that they do schedules, and all those things are different, and chores. And so anytime a new marriage is established, there's an opportunity for those things to conflict.
Yeah.
And so you have a choice to make. Are you going to allow that conflict to drive a wedge between the two of you, or are you going to allow that conflict to be an opportunity for problem solving?
I remember that question, and I don't remember if it was in premarital counseling or somebody else gave us this question, but the question, is this worth your relationship?
Mm-hmm.
And wow, that's like it's like a Occam's razor kind of question where, okay, no, is it worth damaging the most important relationship on the earth that we put our laundry, in this part of the house instead of that part of the house? No, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And why would I do that? And like you said, you come into marriage, everyone comes into marriage with an established way of doing things. That may be from your family of origin, or maybe you've lived on your own long enough that you've kind of come up with your own pattern. But when you get married, you get to, come up with new ways to do things as a couple. And so some of those are like really mundane things. And I would bet so many of the frustrations early in marriage come from things that really just don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
What time do you eat? What time do you go to bed? Where do you put the couch?
Mm-hmm. Who does what?
Who does what?
Yeah.
Who does the dishes? And who dries the dishes? At the end of the day, none of that really matters. If you go in, what you really should do as a couple is you should say, how can I serve my spouse in this moment?
Yeah.
Well, it's her job to wash the dishes. Well, you know what? Like, wash the dishes. Even it's her job and the dishes haven't been washed. I wonder why the dishes haven't been washed. Maybe it's because she's going to school, she's working. If you do have a young child at home, like, she's stressed to the max. There's a reason she hasn't washed the dishes. Now, if you know your spouse to be a lazy person who just doesn't care, and now that's a different issue altogether. But if you have chosen wisely and you have married a mature young man or a mature young woman, then you didn't marry a lazy person. You didn't marry a selfish person. So there's a reason the dishes haven't been washed. So, get off the couch and go wash the dishes.
Right.
Stop worrying about whose job it is and just go do it and serve the person that God has assigned you to love more than any person on this planet, and choose to be kind. Choose to be kind. Again, somebody else challenged us on this early in marriage, where they said, why is it that you would stop by the bank on the way home? I know nobody actually goes to a bank anymore, but in those days,
coffee shop maybe.
Yeah, the coffee shop. You stop by the coffee shop on the way home, and you don't know the person, and actually they take a long time getting your order, or they don't get it right, or they don't hear your name correctly. They call you by the wrong name. There are all these like little micro offenses that that you could choose to take the wrong way. But because of kind of the social rules, you're kind to them. You say thank you. You use kind language. You don't lose your temper with them. But then you have no ongoing relationship with this person. But the person that you are assigned to love the most in life, you come home and you treat them like garbage. I'm not saying to treat the coffee shop person like garbage, but actually your life would be a lot better if you saved all your kindness for your spouse.
But it just goes to show we have a choice.
We do have a choice.
We have a choice in how we react to people. We have a choice in how we interact with people. And to say, I just lost my temper, or I just can't, with them. That's not true.
Mm-hmm.
You have a choice in how you react to someone and how you respond to someone. And even in the choice to react versus respond, make the choice to respond, and to respond in love, and respond in kindness, and respond in grace.
And what that does is that builds the kind of relationship, and it's hard. It is hardest in the early years. Mm-hmm. But if you will do it in the early years, then it builds the kind of relationship where that's just who you are and who your marriage is. Mm-hmm. And then it pays dividends for decades to come.
That's right.
We said multiple times we're going to write a book called Sweat the Small Stuff, because, there's that idea out there, and even a book, don't sweat the small stuff. Actually, we think it's exactly opposite. Major on those small things, on being kind when you're tired, on going out of your way to serve one another, on creating that environment in your home. And then that builds, and it pays dividends 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years later. it sets the course and builds those things.
Yeah, because in those first 5 years of our marriage, we had stressors. I mean,
Hmm.
there were stressors. There were a lot of things that were difficult, but nothing compared to what it would be like once we had
Right.
children. Those are different level stressors there, and then of course into church planting later in our life. And so we were able to really make some deposits in our relationship that first 5 years emotionally and relationally with one another that we were living off the benefit of for a
Absolutely.
decade. I
Yeah.
mean, it really was such a blessing to be able to have such a strong foundation with one another so that when those additional stressors entered into our relationship, we had some stored up grace with one another that
Right.
we could really pull from, and we could remember he really does have my best in mind when he does this, and she
Yeah.
really does have my best in mind or have our family's best in mind, or she means the best when she does this,
And I,
rather than assuming the worst about each other
and I
because we
think
hadn't built that in.
going through 5 years where we got to connect so well with each other. And by the way, this is not none to one. This is the first five, clearly,
Mhm.
because we're not going to get to one. We need to come back and talk about from none to one. But um, those first 5 years, spending so much time investing in each other, cutting the cable out, and the fact that we were not super financially well off because of being in ministry and that kind of thing. We didn't go to a lot of movies. We weren't really even able to go out to eat a lot, and so we just spent a lot of time together,
Mhm.
taking walks, riding bikes, just whatever we could do. We spent a lot of time together.
We did get some dogs.
We did
It
get
didn't
some
go well with
dogs.
any of our
No,
dogs.
no. I love dogs.
Mhm.
It just it just didn't
Didn't
go
work out.
well. No,
Just
it
didn't
didn't
work
work
out.
out well.
Yeah. But
Uh,
thankfully, when we do start talking about how we had children, it worked out much better with the
it did,
kids.
yes. It worked out much better with kids. But I was going to say that we were pretty strict about date nights, and we tried to have a lot of date
Mhm.
nights. And then when we get into the stage of life where we moved to Miami and we're church planning, I mean, just our date nights like disappeared,
Mhm.
and for a lot of reasons. And we'll get into that in that stage. But we still maintained a very strong love for each other through that season, and we just couldn't. It was logistically almost impossible in those early years in Miami to have date nights for a lot of reasons. But we had spent so much time together earlier that we were kind of living off of that. So
Mhm.
those were the first 5 years. Anything else? I was going to say, we didn't have a lot of money, and I remember people feeling sorry for us over this, where it was actually one of the highlights of our week. We would save up quarters throughout the week
Mhm.
so that we could, on the way to church on Sunday morning, we could go through the McDonald's drive-through,
Mhm.
and I believe it was like $2.15 that we had to have for each of us to get a
A butter biscuit.
butter biscuit and water to drink. And we
Mhm.
would go, and it was like the highlight of our week to pull through the McDonald's drive-through, and we've done it. We have saved up 8 quarters, and we have the 15 cents that we can pay the tax with,
Yeah.
and we're going to get 2 biscuits on the way to work. And we didn't really tell people about this, but as they found out about it, they would say, "Well, listen, here's $5. Get you a real breakfast." And we're like, "No, but this the
This is
biscuit
fun.
thing." Like, we look forward to the biscuit that we get on Sunday mornings.
I'll
So
say the other thing too is during those first 5 years, how supported I felt by you in even in my career in working as a teacher and as a student. So my first day as a classroom teacher, I was teaching kindergarten in a very rural setting, and it was just chaos. It was really bad.
you had this idyllic
I mean, I spent all
thing.
summer. I spent all summer making this room perfect, beautiful.
It
I
looked
had
like a
theme.
castle.
It
It's like a
did.
castle.
I had a kingdom theme. I had
And
a
you
castle
thought
painted on the
all of
wall.
these 4 and 5-year-old kids were going to roll in that first day,
And be
and they were going to
perfect
be
subjects in my
they were
castle.
going to be so enamored by this beautiful castle.
And I had these beautiful curtains hung up on the bookshelf to cover all of my supplies. And
It was
I
a
mean,
Wednesday. I know it well because I was at church in the office on your first day.
so I called you once the last student finally left, once we finally figured out what bus they were supposed to be on because they didn't know, and the parents had just dropped them off with a garbage bag of supplies at my door. I didn't even know their name. Anyway, the student finally got to where they needed to be, And I just lost it. I just called you, and I don't even know that you could understand what I was saying. I was just in tears. It was so bad. And so
You cried all the way to
I
church on
cried a
the phone,
lot.
and then that's how I know it was a Wednesday, because I would work in the office on Wednesdays, and you came straight into the office,
Yeah.
and I closed my door and just said, okay. I think people were already starting to get there for the Wednesday afternoon activities. Just closed my door and just said, okay, let's hear it.
It was bad.
And
It was really bad. And so we've got it under control and made it through the year. And so the next first day, my
I
second
had learned
year,
this from my mom, and I feel bad that I didn't do it your first year, but my
it would have
mom.
really been great. I'm going to tell you now.
My mom would bring me, even as a teenager, 15, 16 years old, when she was a classroom teacher. I would go to her classroom, and I would just be there the first day. The presence of an adult male in a room, and
Mhm.
look,
What,
can
you
s-
saying there's something different between a
you
man
can
and a
people
woman?
can say whatever they want to say about men and women, and whatever, and gender roles and all that. I can tell you this right now: you put an adult man in a room full of children, and things change in that
Mhm.
room.
They being behaved.
They will be being behaved
Mhm.
much
So
much more easily than.
that first day, my second year, the first day you came with me and you just sat over in the corner and you had a little fun with it.
I did.
Every once in a while you had a little fun with it, which helped me because that helped me relax and have a little more fun with it too. But it was night and day different. Like the way we kicked that year off was just so much better.
when
Went so much smoother.
when you were going over the rules with the kids, and
Yeah.
you were going through the classroom rules, and everybody's kind of listening, I would just throw out there things like, hey, I tell you what, there was one kid last year, he disobeyed rule number 4, and nobody's seen him since. And I mean, these are like 4 and 5 year olds, and I mean, I'm just serious as I can be. I'm like, I
And
tell you
just
what,
the
I'll be honest with you, I would not dare disobey that rule right there, because there was a kid last year, and nobody's heard from him since he disobeyed that rule.
And then from time to time, the kids would just kind of look over at you at the table like, why is he here?
Yeah,
You
like
know,
I tell you what, right now, you
who is
you
that guy?
you mess with my wife, and it won't be a good day for you. I just and it was. Now, did some of them go home and say that kids disappeared from the classroom for disobeying
Maybe.
rules? Maybe they did, but my thought was, well, you know what? Kids say all kind of crazy
That's
things.
right.
Boys, kids just say the
Kindergartners
craziest things, don't they? I
especially.
mean,
You
my
believe
goodness, look at
that?
those imaginations, those little kids, those wonderful little imaginations.
But
So,
that was one of the many examples of ways that you just showed me how much you love me by stopping your day and investing a day with me because you knew how much it meant to me and how much I needed that. And so those little investments were huge.
and I do remember, boy, when you started getting that real paycheck, that was a great day.
Yeah.
So I was working at sometimes 3 jobs, and then your one paycheck was more than my 3 paychecks put together. And I remember when that happened. I also remember that the Board of Education in that area that you worked for, they would delay giving you your paycheck until
Mhm.
the end of the first month.
Yes, I had to work an entire month before I
And
ever got paid.
their reasoning, because I asked them about it, I said, hey, we need the money now. I actually think it was 2 full months. I think you would work in August. You were supposed to get paid at the end of August
I
because you
got paid
worked a
in
month.
October.
And then you
Yeah.
end up getting paid at the 1st of October.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're just kind of holding things together, and we really were looking forward to that paycheck. And so I remember saying, hey, why would you do this? And their reasoning, well, so that when you retire, you actually get an extra month's pay at the end. And I thought, okay, I don't know what the real reason is, but that's a lie.
Yes.
Because if you need a paycheck by the time you retire, if you need a paycheck that badly, you don't need to
What
retire.
season of life do you need a paycheck?
Yeah,
It's
it's
the
that
early
one.
one, not the
But
late
I
one.
did find out later why that is. The state Department of Education sends the money to the local Department of Education, who then pays the teachers out of that money. And so they hold on to that money as long as they can, so that
Mhm.
they make interest on that money before they actually pass it along
I mean,
to the
let's be real.
teachers.
I was buying stuff from my classroom in July.
Yes.
I mean, it was
And then October you get your first
yeah.
paycheck. But anyway, that's something for
Trump's going to fix the Department
oh,
of
sure,
Education,
yes.
so we're
It's
not going
all
to have
going to
to
be
worry about
fixed.
that.
Everything's going to be fixed, and it's all going to be great. But That was the first five, the
Yeah.
first 5 years.
Yeah.
So I think we lived in, how many houses did we live in?
In the first 5 years?
Yeah, we lived
Let's
in
see.
the house in Cuthbert.
Mhm.
We lived in the house that we bought. We lived for a couple of weeks with my parents
And then
as we were remodeling the house.
we lived in the house in Southside.
Okay, so we lived in, what's that, 4 houses that we lived in, and really one just
Served
staying
at
while
3
parents
different
were.
churches.
Yep,
Mhm.
youth pastor and pastor at Mount Carmel and pastor at River Bend. That was my first full-time church, and
Mhm.
so and really that's part of the none to one story. That was really that season of life when
Yeah.
we were pregnant and welcomed
Well, I was.
Jackson. You were pregnant, yes, and welcomed Jackson into the world. So that'll
Yeah.
be for next time.
Okay, sounds great. Looking forward to it.